A horrible and a shocking case in the Bronx. Former city teacher convicted of killing both her kids, a 4-year-old son and an infant daughter. Lisette BAMENGA, she fed them windshield wiper fluid mixed into their juice, then drowned them in the tub. Her defense attorney said she shouldn't be held responsible for her actions as she suffered from postpartum depression. The judge agreed, saying in part, quote, "I cannot ignore the shocking gravity of your crimes, but I also cannot ignore the role of postpartum depression." Okay, for this conversation, and I don't think there's disagreement, let's just all assume that it was real. She was clinically diagnosed with postpartum depression. This was not a well woman.
I can argue that, though. I can argue that real quick because, you know, she's doing online searches for how to kill her kids, and she's going to Pep Boys, buying windshield wiper fluid, mixing it with grape juice, and leaving a note behind that says that she's doing this to get back at her husband who fathered a child with another woman. You're telling me that's not a calculated killing? There's evidence to the contrary. It's not a black and white case.
Fair enough.
Calculation, though, can be within the context of a mental disease. It really can be.
But you know what? It's an excellent and a fair point. Let's assume for this conversation, though, that she was not well. You still got 2 dead kids. And to me, 8 years, whether it's in a psychiatric institution or a jail, it just doesn't feel right.
That's
it feels that the punishment just does not fit the crime in this case. And yet I know, Jimmy, this woman is not well. You know, but I just can't get past, you got a baby and a 4-year-old, and there was thought that went into this. There was premeditation that went into it.
Look, I do not know the specifics to the extent that this judge did, but I know this judge, Judge Marcus. This is not a man with a soft touch for a case that significant punishment is warranted. He heard the case. He tried the case. And look, if there's sufficient evidence to demonstrate that this woman suffered so significantly from a mental disease or defect, it is the problem that we have here in society, and that is, what do you do with people who suffer from such a mental disease when it comes to punishment? And no, it doesn't sound right, it doesn't feel right. You look at the photographs of those beautiful children, but I suppose you really need to hear the evidence and the medical testimony in order to see whether it can feel a little bit better.
That said, Doug, and I grant everyone that, is 8 years still feel enough?
Well, you know, 8 years is 8 years. Like, 8 years is not nothing. This is a woman who's a school teacher. I assume she did nothing wrong prior to this. She's never going to do this again. 8 years of her life is a long sentence for somebody.
You have an infant and a 4-year-old.
She's not going to do it again.
Right?
Listen, it's a horrible crime. Nobody's going to ever look at those pictures and say, hey, you know, this is nothing. But it's a horrible situation. You have a mother who actually killed her children, who's never done anything wrong before. If that's not the clearest indication of severe mental illness at that point, I don't think there could be more of an indication. Rich, but nobody will ever say it's right.
I hear you.
It's just a tragedy.
Right. Let's say she got treatment, and that the attending psychiatrist, the physicians say, you know what, with proper medication and everything else, this woman will not be a threat to society again 2 years into treatment. Do we then say, okay, fine, now she's going to get a criminal sentence for what she did? Or, in effect, is that double jeopardy, that we're punishing somebody who's clinically ill versus somebody who's just a criminal?
No, you need a compromise. You have to have some punishment and treatment. 8 years in jail is not going to treat her mental problems, and vice versa. You know, just going into an institution isn't going to feel like justice when you have 2 dead kids. And it's heartbreaking, but this is the problem with our system when it comes to mental illness. It's all or nothing. If you're insane, you face no consequences. You go to an asylum and you get treatment. I mean, Hinckley, who didn't even commit the assassination. He didn't even kill anybody, and he is still in the institution. And this woman's going to be out and free in 8 years. And you have mass shooters, like in the Colorado movie theater shooting, where this guy paralyzed and killed dozens of people. And had the jury found him insane, he would be free, or he would be getting some treatment, and then he'd be released out into society, even though he admitted that he still has the urge to kill. In fact, in Colorado, they amended the defense, insanity defense, so that if you have an urge to kill, that actually will get you off, even if you knew the difference between right and wrong.
What
Does
if
that make sense?
Well, it doesn't, but I also know he's not getting out. And nobody thought for a minute that the Colorado shooter in Aurora would get out here. But what if she does her 8 years and she has another kid? We still feel the same way? We still don't think we're sending another loaded gun into society, potentially? We're not agreeing that we want to sterilize people and all the rest? I mean, this is America, right? But how do we focus those mitigating factors into this? I'm putting you guys in an impossible situation, but I mean...
You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if in fact what is needed here is treatment, then treatment is what it should be, and it should be done in a way that hopefully the person will never reoffend. But what you're saying is we're in an impossible situation. She gets out in 8 years. As Amy says, she has not had any treatment. Now she has another child, and there very well could be a recurrence, and there's nothing that you can do about it. But when a judge has a defendant before him or her to be punished, he's got to judge the case and the appropriate punishment based on the facts of what happened.
But nobody can defend those kids, right? Because the mom's on trial. It's not like you have an entirely separate family where you have parents and siblings
Amy,
coming to their
the
defense in a
what's
sentencing
the right sentence,
hearing.
Amy? What's do we give her
There
life?
needs to be a combination, though. She needs to go away for a long time.
Is 8 years okay with you, or is 8 years plus
I don't
treatment
think 8
okay
years
with
is
you?
okay.
Well, what's okay?
I mean, it's a good question, but
Yeah.
it's got to be 2 lives. She
Listen,
should go away for 50 to 50, 40 to
isn't
50
perfect.
years.
The
That's what I
justice
think,
system
if that's
is
the max.
what we use, but it's never perfect. When somebody dies, you can't bring them back. There's no sentence you can give the person that killed them to bring those people back. So if that's the yardstick, you can't get justice. You do the best you can. And this judge listened to this. He thought it was valid. He gave a very stiff sentence to somebody who's never been in jail before of 8 years. The presidential election that's going on right now, that person will have served 2 terms before she gets out. It's a long time.
Just doesn't feel long
It just
enough, I
doesn't.
guess.
You're right. It doesn't equate with
All right.
murder.
Coming up next year, speaking of years, it's been 20 years since the O.J. murder trial happened, and it's once again back in the news again. Now, we have new revelations about that infamous glove incident. We'll discuss how this case changed everything.